Chapter 21. The Blessed City. On my youth I was told that in a certain city everyone lived according to the scriptures. And I said, I will seek that city and the blessedness thereof. And it was far, and I made great provision for my journey. And after 40 days I beheld the city, and on the 41st day I entered into it. And lo, the whole company of the inhabitants had each but a single eye and but one hand. And I was astonished and said to myself, shall they of this so holy city have but one eye and one hand? Then I saw that they too were astonished, for they were marveling greatly at my 2 hands and my 2 eyes. And as they were speaking together, I inquired of them, saying, is this indeed the blessed city, where each man lives according to the scriptures? And they said, yes, this is that city. And what, said I, hath befallen you? And where are your right eyes and your right hands? And all the people were moved, and they said, come thou and see. And they took me to the temple in the midst of the city. And in the temple I saw a heap of hands and eyes, all withered. Then said I, alas, what conqueror hath committed this cruelty upon you? And there went a murmur amongst them. And one of their elders stood forth and said, this doing is of ourselves. God hath made us conquerors over the evil that was in us. And he led me to a high altar, and all the people followed. And he showed me above the altar an inscription graven, and I read, if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of the members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Then I understood, and I turned about to all the people and cried, hath no man or woman among you 2 eyes or 2 hands? And they answered me, saying, no, not one. There is none whole save such as are yet too young to read the scripture and to understand its commandment. And when we had come out of the temple, I straightway left that blessed city, for I was not too young, and I could read the scripture. Conclusion and meaning of the chapter. This is a powerful and dark allegory by Kahlil Gibran that critiques religious extremism and the literal interpretation of spiritual teachings. The danger of literal interpretation. The inhabitants of the city read a metaphor about removing sources of sin and took it completely literally. In their quest for purity, they engaged in gruesome self-mutilation, mistaking physical destruction for spiritual salvation. The illusion of righteousness. The elder proudly claims they are conquerors over the evil, but the withered heap of eyes and hands in the temple reveals the horrific cruelty of their belief system. It shows how twisted morality can become when driven by blind dogma. Innocence versus indoctrination. The only whole people left in the city are the children who are too young to read or understand the scriptures. This implies that society forces its destructive ideologies onto the youth as they grow, stripping away their natural completeness. The wisdom to walk away. The narrator leaves the city immediately. Because he is mature and can read the scripture himself, he realizes the sheer madness of their interpretation. True wisdom lies in using one's intellect to understand the essence of teachings, not in blindly following the crowd. This chapter compels us to reflect. Are we blindly following literal rules and societal dogmas that mutilate our true potential, mistaking conformity for righteousness? Chapter 22. The Good God and the Evil God. The good God and the evil God met on the mountain top. The good God said, "Good day to you, brother." The evil God made no answer. And the good God said, "You are in a bad humor today." "Yes," said the evil God, "for of late I have been often mistaken for you, called by your name and treated as if I were you, and it ill pleases me." And the good God said, "But I too have been mistaken for you and called by your name." The evil God walked away, cursing the stupidity of man. Conclusion and meaning of the chapter. This is a brief, satirical parable by Kahlil Gibran that highlights human ignorance and the subjective, often flawed nature of our morality. The blurring of lines. Both the good God and the evil God complain about being mistaken for one another. This illustrates that what humans proudly perceive as good is often inherently destructive or evil, and what they fearfully label as evil might actually be beneficial or just. The stupidity of man. The evil God walks away cursing human stupidity. It shows that the ultimate failing isn't rooted in the cosmic forces of good and evil themselves, but in human ignorance and our deeply flawed capacity to judge our own actions and beliefs. Brotherhood of opposites. The good God warmly calls the evil God brother. This profound detail suggests that good and evil are not entirely separate, warring entities, but deeply interconnected counterparts that balance the human experience. This chapter compels us to reflect. How often do we justify our harmful actions under the disguise of good, completely failing to tell the difference between true virtue and concealed evil? Chapter 23. Defeat. Defeat, my solitude and my aloofness. You are dearer to me than 1,000 triumphs, and sweeter to my heart than all world glory. Defeat, my self-knowledge and my defiance. Through you I know that I am yet young and swift of foot, and not to be trapped by withering laurels. And in you I have found aloneness, and the joy of being shunned and scorned. Defeat, my shining sword and shield. In your eyes I have read that to be enthroned is to be enslaved, and to be understood is to be leveled down, and to be grasped is but to reach one's fullness, and like a ripe fruit to fall and be consumed. Defeat, my bold companion. You shall hear my songs and my cries and my silences, and none but you shall speak to me of the beating of wings, and urging of seas, and of mountains that burn in the night, and you alone shall climb my steep and rocky soul. Defeat, my deathless courage. You and I shall laugh together with the storm, and together we shall dig graves for all that die in us, and we shall stand in the sun with a will, and we shall be dangerous. Conclusion and meaning of the chapter. This powerful poem by Kahlil Gibran transforms the traditional concept of failure, presenting defeat not as a tragedy, but as an empowering, liberating companion that fuels true personal growth. The illusion of triumph. The narrator rejects worldly glory and triumphs, realizing that success often traps people in withering laurels. Being constantly victorious can lead to stagnation, complacency, and a loss of youthful drive. Freedom from the crowd. By embracing defeat, the narrator finds joy in aloneness and being shunned and scorned. Defeat frees a person from the suffocating expectations and judgments of society, allowing them to remain deeply authentic. The cost of being understood. The poem argues that to be enthroned is to be enslaved, and to be perfectly understood is to be leveled down. True greatness lies in remaining somewhat wild and uncontainable, rather than being fully consumed like a ripe fruit by the masses. Rebirth and strength. In the final stanza, defeat becomes a source of deathless courage. Together with defeat, the narrator buries the dead parts of themselves, old fears and ego, to stand dangerously free and resolute in the sun. This chapter compels us to reflect. Do we run so hard after the exhausting enslavement of success that we completely miss the deep liberation, self-knowledge, and untamed strength found in our defeats? Chapter 24. Night and the Madman. I am like thee, O night, dark and naked. I walk on the flaming path which is above my daydreams, and whenever my foot touches earth, a giant oak tree comes. Fourth. Nay, thou art not like me, O madman, for thou still lookest backward to see how large a footprint thou leavest on the sand. I am like thee, O night, silent and deep, and in the heart of my loneliness lies a goddess in childbed, and in him who is being born heaven touches hell. Nay, thou art not like me, O madman, for thou shudderest yet before pain, and the song of the abyss terrifies thee. I am like thee, O night, wild and terrible, for my ears are crowded with cries of conquered nations and sighs for forgotten lands. Nay, thou art not like me, O madman, for thou still takest thy little self for a comrade, and with thy monster self thou canst not befriend. I am like thee, O night, cruel and awful, for my bosom is lit by burning ships at sea, and my lips are wet with blood of slain warriors. Nay, thou art not like me, O madman, for the desire for a sister spirit is yet upon thee, and thou hast not become a law unto thyself. I am like thee, O night, joyous and glad, for he who dwells in my shadow is now drunk with virgin wine, and she who follows me is sinning mirthfully. Nay, thou art not like me, O madman, for thy soul is wrapped in the veil of 7 folds, and thou holdest not thy heart in thine hand. I am like thee, O night, patient and passionate, for in my breast 1,000 dead lovers are buried in shrouds of withered kisses. Yea, madman, art thou like me? Art thou like me? And canst thou ride the tempest as a steed, and grasp the lightning as a sword? Like thee, O night, like thee, mighty and high, and my throne is built upon heaps of fallen gods. And before me too pass the days to kiss the hem of my garb, meant but never to gaze at my face. Art thou like me, child of my darkest heart? And dost thou think my untamed thoughts and speak my vast language? Yea, we are twin brothers, O night, for thou revealest space, and I reveal my soul. Conclusion and meaning of the chapter. This chapter presents a profound dialogue between a man, the madman, and the cosmos, the night, exploring the depths of the human ego, self-awareness, and the boundless nature of the soul. The illusion of grandeur. The madman repeatedly compares himself to the vast elemental forces of the night, claiming to be dark, silent, wild, cruel, and patient. However, the night consistently strips away these illusions, pointing out the madman's lingering human frailties, his focus on his legacy, footprint, his fear of pain, his attachment to his ego, little self, and his emotional dependencies, desire for a sister spirit. The path to true self-mastery. Through its rebuttals, the night challenges the madman to shed his protective layers. It reveals that true greatness requires stepping away from the ego, facing the terrifying song of the abyss without shuddering, and offering one's heart openly rather than hiding it behind a veil of 7 folds. The challenge of power. The dialogue climaxes as the night finally questions if the madman can truly wield elemental power, asking if he can ride the tempest and grasp the lightning. This forces the madman to confront the limits of his mortal nature against the untamed forces of the universe. Chapter 25. Faces. I have seen a face with 1,000 countenances, and a face that was but a single countenance as if held in a mold. I have seen a face whose sheen I could look through to the ugliness beneath, and a face whose sheen I had to lift to see how beautiful it was. I have seen an old face much lined with nothing, and a smooth face in which all things were graven. I know faces, because I look through the fabric my own eye weaves, and behold, the reality beneath. Conclusion and meaning of the chapter. This short, profound poem explores the dichotomy between outward appearances and inner reality, highlighting how the physical face often belies the true nature of the soul. Multiplicity versus rigidity. The narrator contrasts a face that is expressive, dynamic, and perhaps deceptive, 1,000 countenances, with one that is unnaturally fixed and devoid of life, held in a mold. It shows how people can either constantly shift their masks or become trapped in a single rigid persona. The deception of surfaces. Gibran challenges the idea that physical beauty equals inner goodness. A glamorous exterior, sheen, can easily hide deep ugliness beneath, just as a plain or unremarkable exterior might obscure profound inner beauty that requires effort, had to lift to discover. The paradox of age and experience. Physical signs of aging do not automatically equate to a life well lived. An old face much lined might belong to someone who has experienced nothing of true substance, while a smooth face of youth might belong to an old soul carrying the profound weight of the world, in which all things were graven. The power of true sight. The concluding stanza reveals the secret to understanding people. The narrator claims to know faces, not by looking at them, but by looking past their own biases, assumptions, and superficial visual processing, the fabric my own eye weaves. True understanding requires piercing through external illusions to behold the fundamental reality beneath. Chapter 26. The Greater Sea. My soul and I went down to the great sea to bathe, and when we reached the shore, we went about looking for a hidden and lonely place. But as we walked, we saw a man sitting on a grey rock, taking pinches of salt from Leah, a bag, and throwing them into the sea. This is the pessimist, said my soul. Let us leave this place. We cannot bathe here. We walked on until we reached an inlet. There we saw, standing on a white rock, a man holding a bejeweled box. from which he took sugar and threw it into the fro. See, and this is the optimist, said my soul, and he too must not see our naked bod. Is. Further on we walked, and on a beach we saw a man picking up dead fish, tenderly putting them back into the water. And we cannot bathe before him, said my soul. He is the humane philanthropist. And we passed on. Then we came where we saw a man tracing his shadow on the sand. Great waves came and erased it, but he went on tracing it again and again. He is the mystic, said my soul. Let us leave him. And we walked on till in a quiet cove we saw a man scooping up the foam and putting it into an alabaster bowl. He is the idealist, said my soul. Surely he must not see our nudity. And on we walked. Suddenly we heard a voice crying, "This is the sea. This is the deep sea. This is the vast and mighty sea." And when we reached the voice, it was a man whose back was turned to the sea, and at his ear he held a shell, listening to its murmur. And my soul said, "Let us pass on. He is the realist, who turns his back on the fowl. Whole he cannot grasp, and busies himself with a fragment." So we passed on, and in a weedy place among the rocks was a man with his head buried in the sand. And I said to my soul, "We can bathe here, for he cannot see us." "Nay," said my soul, "for he is the most deadly of them all. He is the Puritan." Then a great sadness came over the face of my soul and into her voice. "Let us go hence," she said, "for there is no lonely hidden place where we can bathe. I would not have this wind lift my golden hair or bear my white bosom in this air, or let the light disclose my sacred nakedness." Then we left that sea to seek the greater sea. Conclusion and meaning of the chapter. This allegorical chapter illustrates the narrator and his soul searching for a pure, unobserved place to bear their true selves, nakedness to the vastness of life, the sea, only to find the shores cluttered with different human archetypes, each interacting with reality in flawed ways. The futility of imposing perspectives. The pessimist adding salt to make the bitter sea more bitter, and the optimist adding sugar to sweeten it. Both represent the futility of trying to alter the vast, indifferent reality of life with minor, biased, personal interventions, misguided efforts and illusions. The philanthropist trying to revive dead fish, the mystic clinging to fleeting shadows erased by waves, and the idealist attempting to capture ephemeral foam in a bowl, all symbolize humanity's futile attempts to control nature, grasp the impermanent, or preserve the uncontainable, ignoring the whole. The realist is mocked for turning his back on the actual roaring ocean to listen to the tiny murmur of a shell, confusing a small, manageable fragment for the whole truth. The danger of the Puritan. The Puritan, who blinds himself entirely by burying his head in the sand, is deemed the most deadly. His willful ignorance, closed-mindedness, and harsh judgment pose the greatest threat to pure, naked truth and freedom. This chapter compels us to realize that the physical world is too crowded with narrow ideologies and distorted viewpoints to ever truly understand our authentic selves. To find true spiritual purity and liberation, we must look beyond these petty human behaviors and seek a much deeper, untainted spiritual truth, the greater sea. Chapter 27. Crucified. I cried to men, "I would be crucified." And they said, "Why should your blood be upon our heads?" And I answered, "How else shall you be exalted except by crucifying madmen?" And they heeded, and I was crucified, and the crucifixion appeased me. And when I was hanged between earth and heaven, they lifted up their heads to see me, and they were exalted, for their heads had never before been lifted. But as they stood looking up at me, one called out, "For what art thou seeking? Atone?" And another cried, "In what cause dost thou sacrifice thyself?" And a third said, "Thinkest thou with this price to buy world glory?" Then said a fourth, "Behold, how he smiles. Can such pain be forgiven? And I answered them all and said, Remember only that I smiled. I do not atone, nor sacrifice, nor wish for glory. And I have nothing to forgive. I thirsted, and I besought you to give me my blood, to drink. For what is there can quench a madman's thirst but his own blood? I was dumb, and I asked wounds of you for mouths. I was imprisoned on your days and nights, and I sought a door into larger days and nights. And now I go, as others already crucified have gone, and think not we are weary of crucifixion, for we must be crucified by larger and yet larger men, between greater earths and greater heavens. Conclusion and meaning of the chapter. This provocative chapter explores the concept of martyrdom through the lens of the madman, presenting crucifixion not as a tragic sacrifice or punishment, but as a deeply personal pursuit of ultimate freedom, self-expression, and spiritual evolution. The paradox of exaltation. The madman asks to be crucified to force the mundane masses to look upwards. By hanging him between earth and heaven, the people are forced to lift their heads, experiencing a fleeting moment of physical and spiritual elevation they would never have achieved on their own through their ordinary, earthbound lives. The misunderstanding of the crowd. The onlookers try to apply conventional, logical reasons to his profound suffering. They ask if he is seeking atonement, sacrificing for a noble cause, or trying to buy worldly glory. They cannot comprehend a pain embraced willingly without a transactional, worldly, or religious motive. Even questioning how his joyous smile in the face of such agony can be forgiven. The thirst for authentic existence. The madman reveals his true, internal motives. He smiled because he achieved exactly what his soul required. He felt dumb and unable to communicate his profound truths to the masses, so he used his literal wounds as mouths to speak for him. He felt suffocated and imprisoned by their ordinary limited days and nights, using the extreme act of crucifixion as a literal door to escape into a larger, boundless reality. The cycle of spiritual evolution. The ending suggests that this is an eternal, recurring process for elevated souls. The spiritually awakened will always be misunderstood and eventually crucified by the society they outgrow. However, they are not weary of this. It is a necessary, continuous journey of being tested and elevated by increasingly larger challenges, larger men, to reach infinitely higher planes of existence, greater earths and greater heavens.